All right, hello, welcome back to online English class. Today we're going to be working on the second leg of our review for the Unit 5 test together. Okay, so yesterday, um, what we basically did is we engaged in the first leg of preparing for your test, which was simply just an overview of the content that we've discussed over the course of the unit, which, to be honest, is not incredibly complicated or lengthy, right? We have different logical structures that we've discussed, different kinds of claims, different ways of constructing thesis statements, different ways and forms and categories of evidence, different names for logical fallacies, and the classical oration model. So this is not a huge or overwhelming amount of information here, but using it effectively in various rhetorical situations with respect to various kinds of prompts is what it makes this challenging, okay? So we looked at a sample argument yesterday in response to a simple prompt: what's the best form of human government? Um, which we offered two supporting reasons for in our answer. We said democracy is the best form of government, a claim of value, right, about the best form of government. And then obviously you're going to need some reasoning to support that assertion. Why is it the best? Well, here we argued that it acknowledges two things: the rights of individuals to be equally represented in and to consent to the political system that orders their lives. Now, obviously, in order for this reasoning to be persuasive, okay, we would need to explain why these are good things, right? Why these are in basic human rights, and why this helps a society function effectively. Why this helps a society protect the rights that an individual, a human being, is supposed to have, right? But right, for this reasoning, all right, these reasons, these supporting arguments, to genuinely support this assertion, there's a foundational premise here that needs to be unpacked. All right. So if you look at the reasoning here, democracy is the best form of government. Why? Because it acknowledges the rights of individuals. Well, that statement only makes sense insofar as you already believe that a good form of government, or a government's goodness, is measured according to the extent to which it protects citizens' rights. Now, Chinese authoritarian, totalitarian government would probably disagree with that. They would say a government's goodness is measured insofar as it is capable of executing the will of those in control, because those in control know what's best for the country, and what's best for the country might not necessarily reflect, all right, protecting its citizens' basic rights. Okay. So all those demonstrators in Hong Kong that were protesting against Chinese authoritarianism ultimately were protesting because they believed this to some certain extent, whether intuitively or consciously. They believed that a government is good not insofar its ability, insofar as it is able to efficiently and effectively implement the policies of the leaders, but rather insofar as the government protects its citizens' rights. So if this is indeed how a government is measured, the goodness of a government is measured, then it therefore follows that democracy is the best form of government because it protects these basic rights. Okay? So, in other words, right, this line of reasoning, okay, would need to be evidenced, all right, in its body paragraphs. The foundational premise or warrant of the argument would need to be established, all right, and if you do that and you support these two assertions, then this statement, right, this statement is therefore what we would call cogent or logical. You would have a reasonable argument on your hands. Okay. Now, tomorrow on your test, you're going to need to develop a cogent or reasonable argument in response to one of these two prompts. Okay. So let's look at these prompts carefully and talk about the kinds of claims and kinds of evidence, the kind of line of reasoning that you would need to establish in order to answer these questions reasonably. All right. Question number one. In the Gospel of Wealth, Andrew Carnegie concludes that wealthy Americans are, to quote, consider all surplus revenues which come to him simply as trust funds, which he is called upon to administer and strictly bound as a matter of duty to administer in the manner which, in his judgment, is best calculated to produce the most beneficial results for the community. All right, in his view, this approach to economic inequality will lead to a quote, ideal state. All right, so your job is to write a well reasoned argumentative essay about how wealthy Americans should approach the issue of economic inequality and the improvement of the quality of life of poor Americans. Okay, so the language of the prompt gives you a lot of freedom. All right, you can go from you can offer in your claim of policy a wide range of opinions. Okay, starting with uh, simply saying wealthy Americans should not approach economic inequality and the project of improving the quality of life of poor Americans. Okay, they should not concern themselves with that. That's not something that they need to approach. It's something that they should be indifferent to. All right. So if you said it should not be approached, then you would need to offer some reasons why it shouldn't be. You would need to explain from the libertarian individualist perspective why wealthy Americans should only worry about their own well-being, even as they allow everyone else in the society to worry about their own well-being. Okay, you might want to reason, as many libertarians do, all right, that anytime a wealthy individual goes out of his way to take care of someone less fortunate than himself or herself, he or she is diminishing that poorer individual's self-reliance. All right, entrapping them in a cycle of relying on another person to improve their life instead of improving their life for themselves freely. Okay? So that would be a libertarian argument against approaching economic inequality as something that needs to be dealt with or improved by wealthy Americans. That approach would be an approach of indifference. They shouldn't go out of their way to fix it. They should approach it by allowing it to stay, by maintaining competition. All right. You could also say it should be approached in, and then you would need to offer the way that it should be approached, and then you would need to offer reasons why it should be approached in the way that you have offered. Okay, so some example approaches would be Andrew Carnegie's approach. All right, should wealthy people be left to administer their excess wealth according to their own judgment? All right, according to the way that they see fit, according to their own personal judgment, right? If that's the best way, right, you would need to explain why, right? Why is that the best way? Okay. Or if, like Jane Addams, you point out the problems with that approach to charity, right? Because you perhaps would assert, like Jane Addams, that the wealthy individual is not necessarily also the virtuous and wise individual, and so they might not know what is best, all right, for individuals less wealthy themselves. So if we actually want to improve, all right, the economic well-being of poor Americans, right? What's the best way to do it? Well, if you ask Jane Addams today, she'd probably say through government agencies, through government institutions, who are not individuals, but rather who are that is an entity, all right, that is owned by the people and operates for the benefit of the people. Okay. Now, obviously, a lot of small government conservatives would have problems with that because it would say government bureaucracies don't work the way that they're supposed to work. So, again, these are all issues that you would need to think about, right? You would also need to think about what specific aspects of inequality, what specific aspects of the quality of life of the poor should be addressed. Okay? Should the poor receive free health care, free food, a basic monthly income, all right, which was proposed by a number of different politicians this year. Should they be given access to free education? Should they be given what needs to what areas of the quality of life of the poor need to be improved in order to authentically um, and effectively diminish economic inequality in a way that is fair, in a way that is just, in a way that aligns with American values. Okay, so that's the question that you're meditating on in this essay. It's a big, big question. All right, and I just want to see your general thoughts about it. Okay, you could talk about it with your parents if you wanted to and try to explain to them the issue. I'm sure that they have thought about this in their adult life, especially if they are at all interested in politics and vote. All right. Um, so feel free to do that. See what they might have to say, but make sure that you are working through this and establishing some kind of claim and some reasonings that you're going to some reasoning that you're going to base your claim on. Okay. The second option here is an essay that engages with Ellison Durant Smith's argument from Shut the Door. Okay, so he makes two primary assertions in that argument that we talked about in OTN 8. He argues that white Anglo-Saxons, white people, have a history of valuing personal freedom and the rights of the individual, which makes them distinctly capable of self-governance in a democratic society. Okay, in other words, really simply, if you're going to have a democratic society, then you need citizens who value personal freedom and the rights of the individual. Okay, individual rights and personal freedom. Okay, you need that for a democracy. Durant Smith argues that white Anglo-Saxons have a unique and distinct history of valuing these things. Okay, number two, non-white races. Okay, so you can think of any non-white race. Okay, because Ellison Durant Smith was a white supremacist, an Anglo-Saxon supremacist, a Eurocentric white supremacist. So basically, you would say any non-white race. All right, Jews. He would consider Italians non-white. He would consider the Polish non-white. He would consider certainly African Americans or black individuals as being non-white. He would consider East Asians as non-white. He would consider Arabic individuals from Central Asia as non-white individuals. Non-white races do not have a history of valuing personal freedom, he implies, and individual rights. So they are not suited for self-governments in a democratic society. They don't value the things that you obviously need to value in order to participate effectively in a democratic society. So, according to these two assertions, this is why Durant Smith says that we should shut the door to non-white immigrants, right? To maintain what he would call the purity of the American breed, okay, which he refers to. Okay, so in order to maintain the purity of the American breed, we need to shut the door to non-Americans, because if we don't, we will give up democracy and self-governance and liberty. We'll give away all of our American values. All right. So, what I would like for you to do, this essay is a claim of fact. I am asking you to write an essay that explores the extent to which, I've changed the language here. I did say simply to refute them, okay, because I don't want you to write me some sort of white nationalist Nazi paper, okay. But I'm going to open the door just a little bit and invite you to be wise, invite you to be thoughtful, okay. And I want you to write me an essay that explores the extent to which Smith's assertions are true. So, is this true and is this true? Is this true but this not true? Is this partially true and this partially true? Is this sometimes true and this sometimes true? I'm not going to answer that for you, but what you would need to do here in your central claim is you would need to say that Smith's assertion here is valid because of X, Y, and Z, and here is invalid or valid or okay somewhere along that on a spectrum of true or not true. Okay, and then you would need to offer me reasons, evidence that illustrates the ways in which this assertion is either true or not true, and this assertion is either true or not true. Okay, so that is your task on your essay. All right, so let's talk quickly about some of the composition skills that you will need to illustrate that I will be grading on your test. Okay, for the analytical portions, okay, you need to be able to understand, describe, and explain the elements of the rhetorical situation. So when I ask you to analyze a claim, when I ask you to analyze evidence and evidence use, you need to be able to explain to me how the writer, the author, is using that evidence in order to be particularly persuasive to its particular audience to accomplish its purpose within its context. Okay, so you always got to be conscious of rhetorical situation when you're analyzing rhetoric, right? So you also need to be able to develop a paragraph that includes a claim and evidence supporting the claim. All right. So your central claim in analytical writing, right, a little bit different than say a central claim in an argumentative piece of writing. Your central claim is that identifying what kind of evidence or what kind of line of reasoning is going on in a certain piece of text. Okay, so if I asked you to analyze Carnegie's use of evidence to support his claim in paragraphs 2 through 5 of the Gospel of Wealth, you would need to identify what the claim is, identify the kind of evidence at work, and then explain to me why this particular form of evidence is persuasive in this context. That is your central claim. And then, in order to support your claim, what do? You use textual evidence. That's your evidence in an analytical argument or an analytical piece of writing. Your evidence is the text supporting and illustrating the validity of your assertion that Carnegie is indeed using this kind of evidence in order to support this kind of claim, and it's persuasive because of this reason. Okay? All right, you would need to develop a line of reasoning commentary that explains throughout the argument. Your line of reasoning in an analytical paragraph, once again, is going to move from your interpretive analytical claim to explaining how that claim is valid and evidenced in the text, okay? So the rest of these are just about writing clearly, okay? So you want to make sure that you're strategically using words, comparisons, and syntax to convey a specific tone or style in the argument. What tone or style are you going for on your test? Informative, analytical, academic. All right, write your sentences that convey clear ideas and arguments, and use the conventions of grammar and mechanics to communicate clearly and effectively. Okay, what about your argumentative essay? First, you need a thesis statement that requires proof and defense. So you need to clearly have a thesis statement that answers one of these two prompts on your essay. Second, you need to be able to write an introduction and a conclusion that is appropriate to the purpose and context of the rhetorical situation. All right, so if you're writing an introduction, your introduction needs to lead to your thesis statement. It might even explore or explain a foundational premise at the core of the rest of your argument. All right, that would be a really wise way of starting your essay. Now, you also need to be able to develop paragraphs that include claims and evidence to support the claim. So your subclaims in your essay are going to be the assertions or the smaller arguments, the becauses that support your central claim, your thesis. All right. So when you're laying out and organizing your essay, you need to understand, you need to have reason through how each one of your claims made in your paragraphs, your body paragraphs, support in a unified way the thesis statement that you've made at the top of your essay. Okay. So in other words, central claim. Whether it be the claim of policy or the claim of fact, because of these reasons. Your body paragraphs are going to assert that and explain those reasons using evidence, all right, and clear argumentation. You need to be able to develop a line of reasoning and commentary that explains throughout the and explain it throughout the argument. In other words, okay, your line of reasoning should be established by your thesis statement. Your commentary is going to support your assertions that support your central claim, and your organizational pattern of your essay needs to follow the logic of your statement. Okay. You also need transitional elements to guide the reader through the line of reasoning. Okay. So help your reader move through your line of reasoning. You should say things like, now that we've established this, we can consider, or because this is true, we can also apply this to this particular kind of situation, or in light of the fact that, right? These kinds of transitional elements help guide the reader through the line of reasoning in an argument. Okay, what if you are writing this essay and you have asserted that white Anglo-Saxons have indeed had a history of valuing personal freedom and the rights of individuals, but that doesn't also necessarily mean that this is true. Okay, that non-white races don't. Right? You could use a transition like however here. You would say, your first person of your argument would say, this is true, and you would offer evidence that asserts that this is oftentimes, maybe not always, but oftentimes true. But just because this is true doesn't mean that this is not true. Okay, so you would get into a that would be a qualification essay about Durant Smith's assertions. You would say one is true sometimes, and one, but just because this is true doesn't mean that this is true, and you would then need to explain with evidence why this isn't true. Okay. All right, you would need to use appropriate methods of development to advance an argument. That's just a really general way of saying you need to have paragraphs that are logically structured. Qualify a claim using modifiers, counter-arguments, or alternative perspectives. Okay, so it's nice always to see qualifications of your argument, whether it be, and that just refers to very specific reasoning, and then counter-arguments to unpack and address arguments that stand against yours. And then these last three things are just about your clarity of writing once again. Okay, so make sure that you are reminding yourself of the basics, the basic arguments and claims and evidence used in Carnegie's Gospel of Wealth, Jane Addams' The Subtle Problem of Charity, Ellison Durant Smith's Shut the Door, and Robert H. Clancy's The Un-American Bill, or An Un-American Bill. Okay, if you're in the honors class, you'll have to answer an analytical short response before you write your argumentative essay. If you're in the regular class, you will just write the argument. So choose your argument and get started outlining and collecting your evidence. You can use whatever kind of research you want to. I don't care. All you got to do is attribute it in your essay. You can use no research. You can use tons of research. I don't care. It just needs to be well evidenced and logical. All right. Have a great day.